What is going on, Chaz? We are live.
What is up, entrepreneurs? I hope you guys are doing well. We're at Hump Day, baby. You are tuned in to Non-Corporate Network. You are watching Entreprenews, a show where myself and Dustin debate the top 6 trending small business stories. We each give our take. We got 3 minutes on the clock per story. Dustin, did I do a pretty good job of explaining that?
And just like your arguments, they're so, but you got your point across. Yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, we just love business, love knowledge, and just want to pass the business knowledge on to other entrepreneurs on what's going on. See if any of it sticks out and can help you run your business a little bit better.
Absolutely. Well, are you ready to get this party started?
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So on our first story, so Instagram is on pace to quickly overtake Twitter as the go-to social media channel for news. The biggest growing segment is the 18 to 24-year-olds, which comprise about 26% of people, 12% of adults, 35 and older go to Instagram. And really the growing trend is people are not wanting to read the full article, wanting to read a couple paragraphs. They just want to quickly get the headline and get the content in visual form, and that's where Instagram has taken over. I mean, that brings up a couple things. I mean, in terms of moderation, what does that do for Instagram being more of a news outlet for brands that are marketing and advertising? I mean, typically news isn't the best of news, and so it creates a opportunity where your brand could be, in front of not so great news. And so I think there's a couple things to think about as Instagram moves forward. But I mean, Chaz, what are your thoughts on Instagram just becoming more of a go-to platform for news?
Well, I think it really comes down to your personal preference, but people have tended to not really want to bounce around between 4 different social media platforms. And obviously Instagram, over 1 billion users compared to Twitter hovering around 350, 400 million. And so it's substantially larger. And so that audience is obviously going to want to stay there, be on one platform, not bounce around too much. And I think, as you mentioned, because Instagram's a visual medium, you don't have the same opportunity as you do on Twitter to get your point across, link an article, explain what it is that's being talked about. And there's not really a way to police the attention. So I think it just permutates this whole kind of headline reading culture that's happening, where you post a picture with a little headline on it and people read that and take it for what it's worth and move on with the rest of their day, as opposed to reading the article and getting the full story. So, I mean, obviously, I think that, when it comes to image recognition in Instagram's kind of policies, they can't recognize text in an image and be able to say whether or not that's hate speech, say whether or not that's an actual legitimate headline. And so I think, yeah, there's definitely a risk there in terms of fake news. And I wish us as a culture, I know Twitter's done a good job of not letting you share articles unless you've clicked and read it and spent some time there, which I think is amazing, but you don't have that same kind of luxury on Instagram. So I think something needs to be done there, but it's hard to put your foot in the ground and say, we're going to do this, because I think that it takes more than just one decision to make this better.
Yeah, I think to your point, just the entire moderation, that's where things get complicated. I mean, it's been in the news so much lately, just with Facebook and Twitter. And whenever it comes to AI, there's only so much that AI can recognize, whether it's hateful speech, if there's racism involved, whatever it may be. So this opens up a whole nother can of worms in terms of the type of content that's getting posted and how it can convey or sway an audience.
The nipples being shown is becoming less and less of the worst thing that we're seeing on Instagram.
Yep. On to our next story. So TikTok, they somehow make it in the show all the time. There's been recent news that the vice president, secretary of state, they're all coming out and saying that there's possible talks of the U.S. banning TikTok. They're collecting tons of data. That data can be used for national security, to really exploit, Americans. There's a couple different things that come up with this. TikTok says they don't operate in China, and that's where this argument comes from, is it's China that's coming in and Homeland Security issue. But does this bring up a question? I mean, at what point do we get to where maybe the U.S. can say whether a business can operate here or not? Once if this were to go through, it sets a precedence, and as long as it's a national security, they can say you can do business or not. And so there could be some implications there. But I mean, at the end of the day, the government's job is to protect the citizens of the United States, and I think that's what this move kind of does. Is with all the data that's being collected, I mean, even though it's up to us to accept that, I think there's a lot of security issues that are coming into play with what TikTok could do. But I mean, what are your thoughts on this potential ban?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the government needs to have a say in these types of things when it comes down to American safety. But, if I take you back a few years, 2017, they were asking Mark Zuckerberg in Congress, how do you make money as Facebook, one of the largest companies in the world? So there's not a lot of trust in the government, in my opinion, in terms of making decisions like this. I mean, I'm sure that conversation with Mark Zuckerberg, they realize, we need to kind of step up from here. But I'd like to see, some kind of policymakers or some kind of, job role for specifically data security, specifically for like the implications of social media, some kind of advisor that can be a little more outspoken about this. I don't really see that person coming out of the woodwork, but yeah, I mean, I think it is the government's responsibility to understand threats and eliminate them. And I deleted TikTok like a month ago, and I mean, I'm sure that somehow they're probably still collecting data on me. I don't know how, but based on what I've read, it's a huge risk.
Yeah, and something that's really interesting is India. They actually just banned over 59 Chinese
Yeah.
apps June 30th, so just a week and a half ago.
Yep.
So I mean, it's in the world of cybersecurity and all that type of stuff. I mean, as quickly as some of these apps are rolling out and as big as they're becoming, it's almost like you know China is rolling these out maybe to
Yep.
get more information on countries, but it'll be interesting to see whether more countries take a stance and just completely ban Chinese
Yep.
apps. But I mean, it's
Data's worth more than oil, and you don't need to have a nuclear weapon anymore to really, you know, do something to a country that's devastating. I mean, flipping people into turmoil and riots is just as damaging as trying to invade a country or shoot missiles at them.
yep. No, I agree.
Well, getting on to our next story. So iOS 14 might let you scan QR codes in order to pay with Apple Pay. I think that this is an interesting thing that is been released. Apple hasn't come out and said this, just a disclaimer, but through their open API, there's been some kind of backtracking and seeing that, okay, this is possibly a thing. There's a pathway from QR codes to Apple Pay in their code. So I think that this is where their mind is at in terms of how we can even kind of eliminate POS systems, make it more convenient for the customer. I think that there's obviously some good and some bad that comes out of it. Dustin, are you more focused on the good or the bad on this?
No, I think it's nothing but good. I mean, especially what we're going through right now with the whole COVID and needing more contactless stuff. I think this is in that direction. But at the end of the day, it's, a quick scan. I mean, Apple Pay is so much quicker. I mean, granted, it's only a couple seconds, but you add that up between everyone that's checking out. I mean, you can just make the world a more efficient place this way. I mean, in terms of eliminating POSs, it's going to be a little difficult until they can get 100% market share on, just the device industry, because
Right.
those that don't have Apple, that have Android, I mean, this wouldn't function there. And I mean, I'm sure Google's coming out with something relatively quickly if Apple does roll this out. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, I know you're huge on no job elimination and stuff like that, where if we do this, I mean, that gets rid of merchant services or puts a huge dent in merchant services. It then brings up, do we need cashiers as much? I mean, if you have self-scanning and cameras to make sure everyone's scanning everything and you can quickly pay that way, then, could this create job loss, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
Yeah, no, well, 2 points here. So one, I think Apple Pay is kind of a novelty still, even with Apple users. I have Apple Pay. I never use Apple Pay. I still use my cards. And it's like,
That's crazy.
yeah, you could call it convenient, but, there's not enough places that accept it. I don't use it. And I kind of got this animosity about using it because it's like, well, I don't know how it works. And so, like, I know there's a lot of consumers feeling that. And I feel like just in the US, it's going to take us probably a few more years before people are comfortable doing it. So I don't think if you just switched it out tomorrow that you're going to get a whole lot of consumer acceptance around it anyway. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea. The other side of this too is, like you mentioned, there's 2.5 million people that are waitresses, waiters in the U.S., and that's not including all of the baristas, all the people that are working off the POS systems and in other places. And so, I mean, let's say maybe call it 5 million people in the U.S. are employed to use the POS system and run your card. We're eliminating quite a bit of jobs there. And, I look at that as something that in this time, okay, I get it. We want to be more lean, but there's only a finite amount of restaurants that can exist. You kill jobs in the restaurant. It's not like you're going to go make 10 more restaurants. Like there's only a certain amount of supply and demand that can be stretched. So I think you just end up putting people on their ass.
Yep. Yeah, I wonder what happened to all those check makers whenever debit cards came to the world.
Hey, touche. Well, before we move into our next story, I just want to mention that we are partnered with State 48. They are an amazing brand based out of Arizona. We are proud to have them in our corner, and we are proud to bring their message to our audience. But Dustin, do you have anything you want to mention about State 48 before we get into our next story?
Yeah, I mean, at the core, it's clothing for all, inspired by Arizona. They're doing a ton of different collaborations with local businesses, nonprofits, and they have a lot of different clothing that looks cool, feels comfortable, but part of the profits go towards charities. And so just an overall great organization. Make sure to check them out at state48.com.
State 48, we appreciate you guys. Thank you. Getting into our next story, Alphabet's Loon Balloons provide their first commercial internet in Kenya. So a 35 balloon fleet will provide internet across 50,000 square kilometers in Kenya, near Nairobi. I think that this is obviously very innovative. Just to mention a couple of other points here, the balloons provide 4G LTE service. Like I said, there's about 35 balloons. They can be up in the air for up to 100 days. They float about 20 kilometers up in the air. And the download speeds are, comparable to, a normal internet provider. So, what do you think this does for globalization? What do you think this can do stateside if we can apply this technology? And do you think it's sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I tip my cap to whoever was in charge of the name. I think Loon Balloon is, pretty funny. But I think it's huge. I mean, there's a good chunk of the world that still doesn't have internet connectivity. And so this is just bringing the world together more, which obviously brings more opportunities for those people that don't have it. I mean, even statewide, I mean, we've mentioned it before on how, buses and cars could be used to roll out Wi-Fi to maybe rural areas or just areas where poverty is pretty rich there. So I think there's a ton of opportunities. I mean, we have a ton of conversation going around inequality. There's the wealth gap, and ultimately the internet brings education, which more education circumvents that. I mean, it with more education, it creates more opportunities, and so you can kind of close some of these things that everyone is kind of chanting about right now. And so I think there's nothing but good. And as we were talking about before this, something like Africa gets more connected, there's a lot to be said where with China, everything's going on with China. There's a lot of supply chain that's coming from there and people are wanting to pull out, but there's nowhere else to really go. And so this could create opportunities where now that things are connected, there's more in terms of logistics. So it opens up more global supply chain. And I think China might be worried a little bit about this, but I think there's nothing but good that can come from it.
Yeah, I mean, I like the ethos for sure. I think that, doing more of this is obviously going to help. I'm wondering what the downfalls are. Just like many of the things that I see coming out, it's like, oh, this sounds great, but we haven't tested it enough to know that the 4G signal has got radiation coming from 20 kilometers up, or one of the balloons popped and blew up, and now there's pollution. Like, I mean, there's so many different things there. And I think that, there's a reason that we use fiber optic cables. There's a reason we use Wi-Fi off of modems, because it's not a freaking balloon that's flying up in the air. So, I mean, I think it's a band-aid to where I think, the next place I'd like to see is either what Facebook is trying to do is wrap fiber optics around the entire continent of Africa. And I know that SpaceX is also trying to put satellites in space to give global Wi-Fi. And I think that that's really going to be more of a sustainable solution. But I mean, I tip my cap to Google for trying to, solve this problem as quickly as they can right now.
Yeah, no, excited to see. I think it's just the first step in a huge leap towards evolution. So excited to see what
Amen.
happens.
Yep. On to our next story. Deep fakes are becoming the hot new corporate training tool. Coronavirus restrictions make it harder and more expensive to shoot video. So some companies are turning to synthetic media instead. For those of you that are like, what on earth is a deep fake and what on earth is synthetic media? Essentially, you can use a transcript and then generate AI to make a video of what that transcript is. You can use the likeness of any images online. You can crowdsource images online. You can use voice recordings of somebody's voice. So I know that, Dustin, you mentioned like there was something that came out with Obama talking, and it was like it wasn't him, but you couldn't tell watching the video it wasn't him because of how well done the deepfake was. And so, I think that it's kind of an oxymoron. The headline makes it seem like, oh, this is amazing. And then you read into it and go, well, this has way more downfalls than it seems to have upside in terms of how this can be leveraged. And I mean, obviously talking about China, talking about cybersecurity, talking about North Koreans, 9,000 person cyber army that they've formed to kind of do R&D on the technology like this. I think that this can be very disruptive and is just as damaging, if not more damaging, than the TikTok story we mentioned in terms of the risks that can happen here. I don't think it's that hard to hack I have somebody every day that's DMing me on Instagram going, hey, download this picture of us. And it's like, then 5 minutes later, they're posting on their story, oh, I got hacked. I can't imagine it's going to be very difficult to hack into these accounts and put deep fakes up on the accounts. And so I think it's a huge risk there, especially when it comes to social media and the distribution audience that they have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like everything else. I mean, it's a tool. It could be used good, it could be used bad, but I think there's a lot of negative implications that could come. I mean, to your point, it's like, I mean, what if someone got a video made of Trump saying certain things, hacked his account, and then came out the video that essentially creates a civil war internally with the United States. And I mean, going back to the comment around it doesn't take bombs and missiles anymore, I think that's where the next big war is going to happen. It's not going to be a missile coming into the United States. It's not going to be people invading. It's going to be creating polarizing situations that divides our country. And I mean, there's a lot that can happen. Yeah. What's interesting is, I mean, going back to what you mentioned a couple of years ago where Congress was asking Facebook how they make money, I think we're getting to where it used to be something would come out and then laws would come in shortly after, a year later, whatever it may be, whenever bad stuff would happen. But technology is expediting so fast that we're getting to where it might take 8, 9, 10 years before legislation comes out to protect the citizens against certain things that are coming out. So, I mean, I'd be interested to hear or see what is being discussed to protect the citizens, to protect the negative things that can happen. I mean, there's a lot of good, like you said, corporate videos and stuff, and there's a lot of good, but I think there's a lot of detriment that it can cause.
Anybody that's in Washington or Donald Trump, if you're watching this, what I think is that we have the ATF, we have the FBI, we have the CIA. I think that there needs to be a data security unit. I think there needs to be some kind of AI police, just like anything else. And that might sound outlandish right now, but, over the next 5 years, I think that we need that or we're going to get beat by that. And so I think that, it's a huge risk in my opinion.
Hey, Space Force sounded outlandish, and now it might be
thing,
here in Arizona. Arizona has a bid to have it housed here. So, no, I agree with that. And to kind of wrap things up onto our last story, so there was a survey that was done with salespeople We've talked about AI and automation and how it can disrupt jobs and take away jobs. Only 12% of salespeople are worried that sales and automation is going to take their job. Um, the biggest pushback, or the reason why, is that a lot of people think that you still need human interaction to close the deal. Um,
Right.
I mean, it's and where a lot of people are coming from is the power of AI could help uncover a lot of insights, a lot of data that could help the salespeople close more deals and their conversion rate gets
Right.
better. So it's more of how can AI complement humanity rather than overtaking humanity. And so, I mean, the 12% that's interesting to me. I mean, a lot more people are doom and gloom. So I would expect this number to be a bit larger. But I mean, do you think salespeople should be worried? Do you think this is a good thing, or what are just your overall thoughts on AI and salespeople and just jobs in general?
Yeah, worried probably isn't the word I would describe. I would say woke, maybe. We need to understand that this is imminent technology that will be brought to fruition, that will be applied to just about every industry. I mean, I look at this and I think that, the way a traditional sales department is set up is you have sales development representatives that are going and finding prospects, reaching out to them, warming them up based off of whether they get their email address, whether they, know that they engaged on something. And then account executives come in once the appointment is scheduled and they close the deal. And so my thought is that rather than, because there's 5.7 million salespeople in the US, and I mean, that's a conservative number, but I'm looking at this going, about half, if not 2/3 of those sales reps are just sales development representatives. They're not the account executives closing the deals. And so if AI is going to come to fruition, I think it's going to eliminate a lot of those sales development reps as opposed to helping them. I think it's just going to eliminate that job role to where AI is scheduling the appointment to where an AE can come on and close the deal. And so I'm not convinced that, I mean, if 2.5 million of the 5.7 million people are SDRs, I think at least 1 million, if not more, are going to be phased out over the next 5 to 7 years. So, and I think that number is just going to continue to rise, but that's a hell of a lot more than 12%.
Yeah, and I mean, I hear it on all fronts, and my thought process is, well, if we're using AI to get these appointments scheduled, essentially the AI will get more scheduled and more qualified booked appointments, and so some of these people that are scheduling the appointments, let's lay out a 12 to 16 month roadmap on how we can educate, how we can train to turn some of these appointment setters into sales representatives. They'll get paid a bit more because they're impacting revenue a bit more, which ultimately they might be happier. I mean, of course, you're
Yeah.
not going to have everyone move over and say, yeah, I love it. You're going to have those people that are just,
Exactly. What's the percentage of businesses that are actually going to be able to successfully execute that? And going back to restaurants, like you can only have a certain amount of restaurants on the block. You can't have 30 restaurants on the block. There's just not the demand to be able to keep those businesses alive. And the same thing here. There's a finite amount of demand on any given product. And so just because you have AI doing the work doesn't mean you're just going to magically have more people have the problem that you're solving. So I think you may be able to find a few more people that have that problem, but it doesn't necessarily just sway the demand of the product.
noted.
Well, I enjoyed this, man. I think, to me, there's a couple of stories that stick out, but I think the big topical thing right now is that, TikTok might get banned, and there's 1 billion people using TikTok, and all of a sudden the rug might get pulled out. I think that's a huge headline.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you're a TikTok creator here in the US, might want to start rethinking what you
Diversify.
create for. No,
Yeah.
I think the deep
Get your
fakes are
audience
what.
in a CRM.
There you go. The deep fakes, I think to me, it'll be interesting to see what comes from that. Like I said, I think there's so much negative that can happen. There's so much positive that can happen. I think it'll be interesting to see what gets done to prevent the negative from
Yeah.
happening. But it's a very interesting
Unfortunately,
technology.
unfortunately, I think something bad is going to happen
Yeah.
before this is addressed, and it's not going to be something that's premeditated that we address. So, but hopefully I'm wrong. But yeah, no, thank you guys for tuning in, entrepreneurs, small business owners, hustlers out there. I know you guys got work to do, so thanks for giving us a couple minutes of your time this morning. And again, thank you to State 48 for helping us to put this thing together. And thank you, Dustin, for letting me whoop your butt this morning on these stories. That was a good time. I enjoyed getting that win. I'm gonna go ahead and take the medal for
Yep.
today.
The only person rooting for Chaz is Chaz.
Oh gosh, I feel like the super villain.
Yeah, I feel like you are too.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being with us. Again, this is the Non-Corporate Network. You've been watching Entreprenews, content made by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. We will be back on Friday, bright and early, delivering some more hard-hitting headlines. Dustin, do you have anything you want to add before we get out of here?
No, make it a great day. We'll see you guys Friday.
Thank you guys.